Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to get a chance to talk with my friend Kimberly Brock. If you want to go ahead and come up, Kim, you can. About her amazing new book that is going to be available in all formats, in all bookstores in less than a month on April 12th. But first, I just wanted, I know, I can't believe it. I'm still thinking about the first time I even knew this was going to happen.
Woo!
And the time from then to now. I'm so excited for you. But Kimberly is the award winning author of obviously the beautiful cover, The Lost Book of Eleanor Dare, that's in her background, and The River Witch, which is also a really wonderful book. If you have not read it, I advise getting a copy, especially if you're into the mystical, coastal, wonderful, witchy stories. It's a great one. So if you're waiting for Eleanor Dare, you can pick up The River Witch to tide you over after our conversation. Kim is the founder of Tinderbox Writers Workshop. She has been a guest lecturer for all sorts of workshops, regional, national, including at the Pat Conroy Literary Center. And she lives near Atlanta with her husband and her three children. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you. I feel so formal.
I know. It's we believe you, everybody watching, we would not normally be this formal if we were
No.
if we were not in this format, but we're gonna try our best to behave tonight. Um, so before we get into talking about the book and your writing process, I just want to tell everyone a little bit about the book. And then that way you can pick up from there if I leave anything out, but I probably hope I won't. Um, so the Lost Book of Eleanor Dare is sort of a mystery within a mystery. It's like what happened to the lost colony is like at the crux of this story. And there's women who have descended from Eleanor Dare. We go through generations and generations of these women. And it all starts with, of course, the message carved onto the stone and the contents of her commonplace book, which a lot of people probably have a little familiarity with that. And it was brought from England as she came to the New World and passed down. And when we get into the story of Kim's novel, Alice was 13 when she got to get to be the next person to receive a copy of it, I guess I should say. But then there's a tragedy that takes place, and there's sort of like an unbroken legacy and what's going to happen. And then we move forward into sort of the ending of World War II. And
Yeah.
Alice, who's a young widow and a mother herself, has been gifted, inherited Evertel, which I cannot wait to talk about Evertel. But it's like her abandoned family home. And so they go there to sell the property, and they sort of start to discover more about themselves as mother and daughter, as, this legacy of amazing women. It's just like a sweeping saga is what I kept thinking of, which sounds so cliche, but it really is. It I don't even know how you did as much as you did with this book,
Well,
which
it's big.
yeah, it is a big
It's a
book. I
long.
mean, what 460
Yeah, like
pages? Some
464, I think.
yeah. So it is a really just such an engrossing read. It's not something that you can read quickly at all,
No.
because there's so much weight to it with the story, with the descriptions, just everything about it. And when I was looking at some of the reviews, of course, it's categorized as historical fiction, but to me, it's just bigger than that. So tell us a little bit about how you got to Eleanor.
Okay. Um, so probably 20 years ago, not even joking, I was living in North Carolina, and this was probably before I published anything. I published my first little short story sort of on a whim. And at that point decided, I'm going to write a novel. I'm just going to try. And my middle son, who's 21 now, was like in pull-ups at the time. And I remember starting to dig around in Georgia history and just, the internet was kind of new at the time, or it was for me anyway, because I was a young mother at home and they would take naps, the kids. And so I would sit and look through stuff. It was suddenly like you had the library at home. So I could just prowl through all of this information. And I like obscure things. I love to find something that I should know about and I don't know about. And, that comes from just fiction as a child, where you feel like you're discovering things. It's the Nancy Drew stuff, and it's the secret garden, and it's what's behind the door, and what's, what's inside the house, and so I guess as an adult, I'm still doing that same thing. And I found this article about this obscure Georgia history that's now housed at Brown College in Gainesville. And apparently in the 1930s and then the early 1940s, these stones were found. One of them, the first one, was found in Edenton, North Carolina in 1939 by a guy who says that he had just stopped on the side of the road. He and his wife were on vacation and he tripped over it.
Oh, wow.
And he saw that it had some kind of engraving on it that was difficult to read, and it was right at the end of the Depression. So he threw the thing in his trunk and they went on their way, because he thought maybe somebody will want this, pay me for it, right? Because like finding a Native American artifact, maybe, he had no idea. This is his story. And they wound up here in Atlanta. And so he thought, I'll just run into Emory College here and see if they want this thing, which I think is hysterical, but that's the story. And right. So they lost their minds, because they looked at it and they said, by God, that's Elizabethan English. And everybody from all over the country and outside of the country that knew anything about this kind of an artifact was coming in to take a look at it and try and authenticate it. And it had the initials EWD. And once they were able to read what was on the stone, they decided that it was a message from Eleanor White Dare, who was the daughter of the colony's governor at Roanoke, the colony that disappeared in 1587. And it's a headstone basically for her daughter, Virginia Dare, the first English or British child claimed to have been born in the New World, and her husband. And it tells that there was a massacre, and apparently she has survived it. And hey, Daddy, here I am. And we're going, come and find me. So everybody went nuts, and it was all in the news. It was all over the place. And it wound up in Brown because the professor there bought it. And they said, hey, y'all, if you find one of these stones that's got carvings on it, we'll pay you for it. So what do you think happened from there? Right?
Everybody was finding stones.
Right. They came out everywhere. So there's 40 something of them that showed up, and there was all kinds of sketchy characters involved, guys that had moonshine in the trunk at the same time. And eventually this reporter from the Saturday Evening Post debunked all of it. And the college was very embarrassed. And so they all kind of got stowed away in this dirt floor basement under the theater at the college. And now you can go see them. They're in an archive room. Some of them are on display, and the main one. But the thing that intrigued me was that nobody has ever been able to prove or disprove or authenticate that first stone. And I thought, that's really weird. How can I not know about that? It was such a big deal, and it's very theatrical, and you'd think that would just be something people would want. It's kind of like a circus act. Don't you want to go see that? So I got in the car. We moved back to Georgia, to Fulton County, and I got back in the car and I went up there and saw it. And this has been at least 9 years ago, maybe longer. And what I didn't expect was that when I actually saw it, I cried. And I realized it was because of her. I don't know who carved that stone. I don't think technically she squatted in the woods and did that herself, after her whole family was destroyed. I don't know. Maybe she did. But the idea that somebody did, somebody remembered her and told her story seemed more important to me than whether it was real or not, that she had existed. Because women disappeared through the cracks of history, and we know so little about her even before she came and was part of the colony and was Virginia's mother. That's what made her famous, that she disappeared and had a baby. And I thought, that's always the story, man. and you don't know the rest, and then you get thrown in a dirt floor basement and forgotten about because you embarrassed somebody. So I wanted to think more about that, and it literally took me 9 years to figure out what to say about that and how to say it and not trip all over it. So that's where it came from.
So the thing is, like, our sort of theme of the night is write what you don't know. So when you decided to take on this task, did it take a lot of research in the beginning, or did you start with the characters? How did you decide to frame it the way that you did? Because it has the dual timelines. And so that in and of itself is a feat, because I just always envision people with huge flow charts like tacked up on the wall, and 5 or 6 different color coded things for each character in the different time periods. So how much research did you start with, or did you go straight into the heart of the characters and then kind of weave it, like a beautiful tapestry?
It was not a beautiful tapestry, and there was a lot of insanity. I tried lots of different ways. I avoided a lot of things for a long time. I made stacks and stacks of notes. I like to write on like yellow pads. I fill up yellow pads with loads of pre-writing, and I'm not fast. I'm a very slow processor. I spend a lot more time thinking about what I'm going to write than writing. So I guess what I started with was lots of just little things that interested me, things that images. I spent a lot of time, I know this sounds like a waste of time, but I spent a lot of time looking at Pinterest. And looking at visuals, at images that I collected, trying to figure out why these things seem to matter or make sense to me, what it was I was trying to talk about. And I didn't know how to write a book about a colonial, pre-revolutionary. I didn't know how to write that and make it interesting, because I didn't want to write about pilgrims,
Right.
Like, to me, that I was just like, it's so distant. It's so, I can't identify with that, and it just didn't set the tone that I wanted. And so I fought against it for a long time. And then I thought, well, okay, so let's set ELEANOR aside and let's think about the Dare Stones in the time period when they were found. I really didn't want to write another World War II historical.
Right.
But so many of them are set in Europe. There's not a lot that's home front World War II. Women home front who aren't spies, who are not involved in that end of things, who are just literally trying to deal with gas shortages and what they can put on the table.
Right.
And when the men don't come home, and when you have a daughter, and who are they going to marry? And I thought, okay, if I start there, say the stones have already come and gone, they've been found, they've been debunked, and you're a person that matters to, why would it matter? So the question of why would it matter and what would it mean to you at that moment in time? And what I figured out was that she was the same. When you're standing at the end of something like a world war, the Second World War, you're on a precipice, you're on a shore, right? Just like Eleanor would have been. You're in the woods.
Yeah.
No idea where you are. It's a new world. You cannot imagine what's going to come next.
Right.
And she had a daughter. And according to those 40-something Dare Stones in the story they told, true or not, Eleanor had a second child, another daughter, who survives her. And so I thought, that's what this is. And I realized what my question was. I had never really worried or wondered about what happened to the rest of the lost colony. I wanted to know what had happened to Eleanor. And more importantly, I thought, so I know if the first stone is real, I know when it was carved. And I know when it was found. But where was that thing all the other time? Was it just laying out in the woods?
Where was it? Just on the side of the road.
Did it matter to somebody else during that time? And what was its legacy? So that's where I went. And I wrote all of Allison Penn's story. And I'll say this. I'm with my third literary agent. I hope I die before she does, because I love her. But I signed with her with that part of the book written, and she read it and she said, "This is wonderful. I love it. I love it. Now where's the rest?" Because she wanted Eleanor's story. And she said, "You know it all. I know you know it all. It's all in your head. You have to, because I see where it goes. I know that you know it. Why is it not here?" And I did know it all. I had it all in those yellow pads, I had all of these genealogy charts that I had written out. I had names for 16 generations of women, full names, when they had been born and died, and who their daughters were, where they had been, and how she had gotten to Savannah. And I hadn't written it because and this is what I wanted to talk about tonight. The feeling that you are giving a history or giving a voice or a story to somebody, and the weight of that. They're feeling like you can step into that place and do that. Who are you to do that? And it took a lot of convincing from my literary agent. So that part, Eleanor's tale, that hits you right in the middle of the book and goes from there, I'll talk about that in a minute. That didn't come till later.
So speaking of sharing, and I know we talked about being like distinctly Southern women and what that means, and then choosing to write about these women and the setting in being in the South, North Carolina, and then Savannah. And I was thinking about it after we talked a little bit the other day, sharing stories is so important, but how protective we feel of them. And I know from our conversations before how protective you were of telling Eleanor's story, but also the other characters in the book, because it's not just about her.
No.
It's a story about women. We're in, Women's History Month. And so it's like a history of women in the South. It is about mothers and daughters. And it's just so hard. I know we have to categorize things to find a place to put them on the shelf in the bookstore. But especially with a book like this, it defies genre to me. And so the weight of that, I can only imagine how it felt piecing it together to make sure that everything fit. But when you decided to tell the version of the story from this, it's World War II, you're a widow, you got to go to this crumbling mansion and try to sell it. Like, just how did that even come? Because as I'm reading the book, I'm like, how did she even come up with this? Like, at what point did you say, "Oh, I know"?
Well, I just wrote an article I don't remember, it's coming out in April for Writer's Digest. And I actually reached out to you about this, about writing about the South, why we love stories about the South. And I didn't actually put this in the article, but really, I really believe this. I think the South is a big haunted house. And one way or the other, that is very intriguing to people for lots of different reasons, right? So Evertell, to me, that's what it is. It's how I perceive the South. It's all of those things. It's horrible and wonderful and terrifying, and you're walking on bones, and you're walking on lies, and you're walking on beauty and everything that's come before you, the people that built it, the people who've lived in it and who they were. It's all of the hands that have gone into that, all of the lives and the things that have passed through it. And I think I tried to put everything I knew about the South into that place.
Got it. And that makes perfect sense when you say it out loud. Even calling it Evertell.
Yeah, absolutely. Why it's called Evertell, because the South tells on us every time, every way we write about it. I think Alice was hard to write. My main characters in both of my books have been hard to write, because I think I wrestle with my subconscious with my main characters more than my secondary characters are so easy. They just happen. And I'm like, why can't you be my main character instead of this brat? So I think Alice is difficult because I'm difficult. She's difficult and not necessarily likable, because it's all the things I don't like about myself and that I'm trying to work out in the book. I guess it's a stupid thing that you do when you write a book. All of your stuff is there, whether you know it or not, until you get to the end. Yeah. Pen is easy, the little girl, because I've already processed all of that, right? So I know how to be that little girl. But a woman who is trying to deal with where she's from and who she is. I mean, I'm 50 years old and I'm still doing that. Yeah. And then I think the question at the heart of the book is you have a daughter, you have a child, you have anybody that looks at you and says, who are you? And you have to figure out how to answer that, whether it's you looking in the mirror or somebody else. So, that's where Evertell came from. I think it's where I think I will always be writing about that place. It won't matter how it shows up in the book. It's always going to be that place.
And there's one line in the book, and it's at a crucial moment, so I don't want to spoil it, but there's just one line, and you said Eleanor learned to disappear. No. And I thought about, as women, because we talk about this a lot, we are taught to disappear. And one of the things that I think is so great about this book is that you are unapologetically writing a women's story. It's a story about and for women, but anyone can read it. It's not like, oh, well, the boys shouldn't read this because it's whatever. But you know what I'm saying? But I just felt that so strongly, that when you were sitting there writing, you were writing for mothers and daughters and sisters, and like giving that push to not disappear. And the only way that we don't is by telling our stories, which we have also talked about.
I'm going to pay you for that.
It's just so true. And I read a lot, that, but it was just so present. And I don't often compare books because they all stand up, but I don't know if you've read the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, which is also like a Georgia book. It's a big old thick book.
I love it.
But it's also this sort of generational saga. And it's like, and when when Honore wrote it, she was very emphatic about, I'm writing this about women, for
Yeah.
Black women specifically.
Yeah.
And I think they're like great companion reads, even though the stories are just
Very
completely
different.
different.
Yeah.
But that common thread is
Yeah.
just so important. And I'm wanting to see more of that in the industry, is the point that I'm making. Because
Yeah.
your book and her book are really the two that has come out the strongest for me as a reader in the past couple of years. And I feel
Wow,
like,
what a compliment.
do you agree though that a lot
Oh
more
yeah,
of our fiction that is
absolutely.
written by women, you're seeing that more and more?
Sure.
Because we're finally at a point where we're like, you know what? we're
This is
not
our
we're
story.
not disappearing anymore.
Right. I agree. And you know, I'm not I don't think I'm anywhere near her level of her gift and her talent, but and this is a commercial book. It's not as literary maybe as my first novel. I think the plot in this book is simple. I hope that because the plot is simple, that you're able to think about everything else that I tried to put into the book. That what's happening to these women over and over and over, generation after generation, that they're finding ways to make a mark, some way that they will be remembered by their daughters and their daughters' daughters. And you know, I think that was how I gave myself permission to write, to come up with whatever I wanted to imagine for Eleanor.
Yeah.
I think the thing that finally clicked in my brain, and I woke up at like 2 a.m. because my agent was just insisting, you just need to try. You just need to sit down and try, give yourself permission. And it took about 6 weeks before I finally did it. I woke up at 2 a.m. and I could hear it. And it wasn't what I expected. It was like a fable. And I realized what I had been trying to figure out the whole time was how to tell Eleanor's story. And I realized I needed to tell it like a story instead of trying to tell it like a bunch of facts. Yeah. You know, instead of having this dry third person. And I thought, okay, well, who would be telling Eleanor's story? Who does that in this book? And it's all of the mothers. It's all the mothers who pass this oral history down, and then Alice's mother writes it down in the book. So I told Eleanor's story, like a mother would tell a story to her daughter. All of the facts might not be there. And in fact, I didn't think Alice's mom would know much of anything about Eleanor. She probably had to make a lot of it up, right? It's 1920s, 1930s. What do you know about the Lost Colony then? She didn't have a computer to sit down like I did and just learn the little bits that I could even find. So that gave me a lot of freedom to realize I'm not necessarily telling the truth. I'm telling a story. And what else would Eleanor Dare have ever wanted when she was standing there in those woods, scratching out whatever she did on that stone, whether she carved it or not? And a lot of women were printers, by the way. Their husbands had their names on the business, right? But the women were the printers. So I liked the idea that it was a story, and that was how I gave myself permission to do that. I think that was your question.
Yeah. And also, because I'm sure that if anyone is watching, they could potentially be an aspiring author, or they may already be working on something. Can you talk a little bit about how to set aside that fear? And you do have to give yourself permission, but between the time that, say, The River Witch was published and then when you started writing Eleanor, I know.
Do you know how many years it's been since River Witch?
Yes. But I also know that confidence and those things, like, just give us a little bit of some inspiration because it is just so difficult when you're sitting there at night or in the morning when you first wake up and you're hunched over your laptop and you're thinking no one's ever going to read this. Like, what are some things that you had to do for yourself to not get bogged down with that?
Other writers, so you can all sit around and bemoan the thing is one way to survive it. I think doing what we're doing tonight, where this is what the book is about, telling stories. And you realize if you sit around and you tell your stories, whether it's something that ever gets published or not, something inside you wakes up and you realize that's why I'm doing this. That's what it is, because you connect with somebody else when you tell your stories, and you work through. I think the 9 years between River Witch and this were strange. And in a lot of ways, I feel like that all went into the book because my kids were growing up as I was, imagining what Eleanor's life had been and what she had done. I was kind of living through some of those sorts of experiences myself. And other writers were a big part of continuing to do that. It's one of the reasons that I started the workshops with Tinderbox, because I told my husband, I'm not writing, I'm not creating anything. I'm just spinning this wheel. I can start the story and I can't finish it. I don't know how to finish it. I don't know how to finish it because I was in the middle of things in my own life or my kids' lives, or the publishing wasn't working and didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. I changed agents again. And I said, I know I can sit down in a room and make space. And if I tell stories and you want to come tell your stories, we'll just sit there together and we'll see what happens. Because I kept hearing all these women around me, and I'm a fantastic eavesdropper. I don't know about you, but that's why I have to work at home. I can't go work at the coffee shop. If you see me there, I am not working. It's a lie. I'm listening to you. So I would hear people, though, like at the grocery store, women, and I would hear them saying, it got to make me a little bit crazy. I would hear them saying things like, I just never do anything for myself anymore. I'm not creative. I don't remember how to do any of that. And they were sad about it, but they're also dismissive about it. Some of them were angry about it. And I kept hearing it over and over again. So I started that workshop, and it was just about living in a creative way, letting yourself be creative, understanding that the things that you were doing on a daily basis are creative, whether it's in an office or in your home or wherever you happen to be, however you're living your life, you're telling a story. And so that helped tremendously, going to workshops with other writers, specifically for me, other women creatives. And I don't know, except to say that I don't think you ever think you're smart enough to write the book that you want to write when you're writing it. I think all authors, if they're honest, are looking at somebody else's work, or they're even looking at my own mess that I'm making. I feel like I'm never going to be smart enough to do it. What I want it to be, what I want it to become, what I can imagine that it ought to be, that it's not. And I never am smart enough until it's finished. It teaches you the process teaches you what you need to know to finish it. And that is the only way I think I finished it, because I just kept thinking, if I just keep trying, maybe we're crazy. Maybe the ones that finish are a little bit crazy, but I just couldn't quit. I needed it to be finished, even if it didn't go anywhere. And I would lay in bed some nights and I would say to my husband, what if I die before I'm done? Because this is my thing. I need it to be finished, because I could die and then nobody else could finish this. And it's Eleanor. It became something else. It wasn't necessarily my own. It just felt like I had to finish it before I keeled over. So it
That was
became like,
absolutely no pressure on yourself at all.
no, not at all. Not a type A. What are you talking about? I think it became more about finishing it and feeling like I could put it down than publishing it. And I can remember sitting with two girlfriends, and I won't name them because they'll kill me. We were sitting around a bonfire, and it was probably 6 months or so before the book published. And gosh, I can't remember if COVID had happened or not. I mean, when we put this book out on submission, I pulled it back because COVID had started, and then Black Lives Matter happened. And I'm like, yeah, here you go. Here's my white girl, coming to America. Don't you want to hear about this sad story? And I said, just take it back and let's just sit with it for a while. It needs to be out of the way. And, there'll be a time when we can make some room for what's going on here. And I really thought it would never publish. I almost just was like, it's done. I'm good. And I remember sitting out there with them around that bonfire with blankets, and there was a full moon. And I was like, this is interesting. Us girls sitting out here under a full moon tonight, talking about why we think nobody's ever going to hear our stories. And I have this whole book about this that I'm sitting on, and I'm holding it back. We do it to ourselves, right?
We do.
And that was to what you were saying earlier. ELEANOR learned to disappear, right? And I realized it wasn't mine anymore. And so, yeah, I'm excited that it's published and will be out there, but it kind of doesn't feel like mine. I just am pleased.
Yeah. Well, I'm just glad that you didn't pull it back and keep it back, especially after all this time.
I'm shocked that
and
I really didn't think it would. I really thought it was just going to go under my bed and that would be okay, But yeah, and that makes it, I don't know, it makes it easy to let it go into the world and not worry so much about what anybody else thinks about it. It's accomplished what I meant for it to. It tells a story about a woman who maybe somebody will find now, and I think you're finding yourself when you read fiction anyway. So that's what I want. I want somebody to pick this book up somewhere. I want them to see it and think, ooh, look, that's a great big book. I like a great big book.
And it's got a beautiful cover too. The cover's just,
I want it to go on and be way too long. And I want them to sit down and find themselves in it. That's what I want.
I think that anyone who reads it definitely will. I'm looking at our time. We got about 15 minutes. We have a couple of questions. The first one is, what did you do first when that struck you at 2 a.m. about ELEANOR? Like, did you hop out of bed and immediately start writing?
Ever hop out of bed. I like to sleep. I could sleep 10, 12 hours a night, but I laid there and thought about it. And I'll tell you, I do my best thinking in the shower, which is awful. I come up with the best stuff in the shower, and like the minute I turn it off, I can't remember any of it. So I've gotten to where I keep one of those notepads so that I can grab it and write stuff down in the nude. So I'm writing my book in the nude, y'all, just in case you want to know. It's not pretty. But I think I just thought about it. Like I said, I think about things for a long time before I actually write. And I'm sure I filled up some of those notepads with things. But once I started writing that initial scene with ELEANOR, it was fast and the voice was just there. That was the easiest part to write. I wrote all of ELEANOR's tale in, I don't think it took me 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
To write that and send it back to my agent. And then I worked on it a little bit, but I had imagined all of that way before then, like the history for what had happened to her. So I wasn't having to come up with the plot. Gotcha. I had information from the dare stones, and then I deviated from that. That was the other thing. I was really intentional about deviating from a lot. I kept the very beginning history that we have for the Lost Colony, and I kept how I think the colony got from Roanoke to the area inland where that stone was found and the massacre happened for the first stones history. And then from there, I deviated because nobody knows if those 45 stones were correct or not. And I thought, why not? Why not give her, whatever story that mother might have made up for her that she thought her daughter needed.
Yeah.
So I went from there, but that's where a lot of historical history came in, because I was looking at trading trails and I was looking at ideas of where there were settlements that they might have, ended up, and how from there, 16 generations later, there would have been this house in Savannah. So, but the voice, I laid there and thought about that, the voice.
This is a good one. It says, do you have any advice for telling a story about a person of color when you are not a person of color yourself? I have the story that I've stewed on for years, but fear of misstepping keeps stopping me.
I don't, because I didn't do that with this book. I don't think I could. And we just talked about this, and I told you, I think I'm wrong about everything. First of all, I have no idea what I'm doing. I ask a lot of questions, and I listen a lot, and I back off, because it's not that I can't imagine. I can imagine a story for a blue alien that I could write very well. I could write a story about a canary, and I could write it very well. I'm neither of those things. The problem with writing from the perspective of a person of color when you are not a person of color is that a person of color is not being given the opportunity to write those stories the way that I am as a white woman. The door is open to me to do that in a way that it is not open to a person of color in publishing right now. Yeah. And so I don't think I should get in the way of that.
And I mean, we've talked about it more than once. So, but I will say, if you have a story that you want to tell, your best avenue is going to be talking to people who have lived the experience of the story that you're trying to tell. Make sure you have sensitivity readers. If something doesn't feel right, then it probably isn't.
Right.
So, I mean, or even like conversations that we've had,
Sure.
So for the person who asked that question, I would definitely say, don't not tell a story because you are afraid, but just be really intentional about how you tell it.
You have to know yourself, and you have to know why you're doing it. And I don't think I know that unless I talk to somebody else about it and try and inform myself, in my opinion. Like the characters that I have in this novel who are people of color, I wanted to give them agency, and I wanted to give them a voice, and I wanted to make them three-dimensional, and I wanted them to be as authentic as I could imagine them to be. And then I asked, then I said, where am I missing the mark? And is my toe over the line? Because I feel like it's a joint effort right now.
Definitely. Yeah.
And so my answer is, I don't know.
I think that we gave some good information. And to say you don't know is a good positive answer. Like, if you sat here and waxed poetic with all this stuff that wasn't, genuine, and I've told you that before, I know how genuine you are when it comes to these types of conversations and that type of a question. So again, for the person who asked that question, write your story and
Yeah.
then
Say, I don't know what to do with this.
and find somebody that you
Yeah.
trust and that you feel comfortable enough being that vulnerable with, and then listen to what they have to tell you.
That's the point. Is
Yeah.
if you have somebody tell you something and they are a person of experience of any kind,
Mhm.
of any kind, you listen and be authentic. And that's all I know. That's only way I know to do it. And I may be wrong.
Oh, we start. Oh, we have another question. How much did your writing process change from book 1 to book 2?
Book 1 is short.
It's a baby book.
Book 1 is short. Book 1 has some history in it and some, it's still set in the South. It's still my voice, but it's not historical fiction. And that's the crazy thing is I didn't really set out to write historical fiction. Like that was sort of an accident. And if you ask my parents, they will laugh and they will laugh and they will laugh because I can't do math to save my life. I can't remember phone numbers. If you tell me your phone number right now, I have to write it down like 2 or 3 numbers at a time. I can't just write the whole thing. I can't remember them.
Yeah.
And my poor agent and her assistant, like I number chapters wrong. I number so I'm trying to do 16 generations of people with birth and death dates, right? Yeah. And all of this history and 2 different timelines. So that's how my writing changed.
Yeah.
I had to learn to organize a lot of information. And I had not done that with the first novel. First novel was very, linear. And this novel is so not linear. Yeah. I do write, women's stories. To me, I see stories in shapes. And until I get the shape right. And I also think of colors when I write. So I know what colors my story is. And my first book was just very round, all one globe, and this one was not. This one was more like a kaleidoscope of things. And so it was more of a process of making that shape fit together. And I know that's very abstract, but in the technical side of it was difficult. It was difficult for me. And so there was a lot more printing out and laying out of things. And there was a lot more cutting out of stuff that, was minutia, historical minutia that I didn't use and took out. And I took out an entire character. I did that with River Witch too, though. So there were things that were the same and things that were different, but mostly it was just the gargantuan.
Yeah. Just bringing all that together time-wise, and I can only imagine.
Organization.
Yeah. Let me see if I have any more questions. I think we kind of covered them, even though I quit reading my notes. If I won't ask you about what's next.
It's a ghost story. I'll tell you that. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all you get.
I know. I was waiting because, a lot of times when I'm talking to writers, I want to say, "What can we expect next?" But because I know you, I know I can't ask that question.
It isn't gonna happen.
Yes, no. But we can look forward to a ghost story. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
And I do want to tell you, I love the River Witch. It was beautifully written, but this is like a whole other world of where I want to sit down with you and go all my little highlighted pages and how long did it take you to write that sentence? Because I'm mad at you right now. Because there are just
sweet. I want to know. I want to know because that's my favorite part of this whole thing is the writing is awful. I hate it. I hate the drafting. I hate it. And I hate the book while I'm writing it. And then when I'm finished and I get to go back and revise, I like that part. That's fun. And I think it's because it's a little more collaborative usually.
Mhm.
And because this is the part I like, is getting to sit down and talk to somebody else who's read it.
Mhm.
It's like I had a dream,
Mm.
and I'm famous for this. My husband's like, will you stop? Could you shut up? Because I love talking about my dreams, and I dream crazy long, big dreams almost every night. And I remember all of it. And he's like, just because he doesn't remember anything he dreams.
Yeah.
And I want to tell him all of it. And he doesn't care.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to listen. He don't care. But when somebody reads your book, a story that you've made up out of your head, it's like they had your dream. And it's
Yeah.
important to them too, because it becomes your dream when you read it, your own dream in your own
Mhm.
imagination, your own head. And so it's like sitting down and talking to somebody, and you both had the dream,
Yeah.
and you want to talk about it, and you care. So
Yeah.
I have figured out finally how to make somebody care about what I'm dreaming.
Well, I mean, because it's just so beautiful. I'm telling everybody that's watching, it is so beautiful,
Oh, you're
and
sweet.
it's so atmospheric, and it's just like you can smell it and you can see it. And
Long-winded, isn't it?
no, it's not. Not like you feel like you are right there, and that's what a book should do, but not all books do that. And so for it to be such a big book, as you keep calling it, your big book, baby,
My big girl book.
it is stunning. Like there's, like I said, I've got a bunch of highlights, and so at some point when you finish book tour, we can meet, and I can like tell me how long it took for that. But I thank you for doing this for Broadleaf. Thank you everybody who's watching. Um, Before we go, where can people find you on the socials, as they say?
You can find me on my Facebook author page. You can find me on Instagram. I really like Instagram. I'm having fun on there. I'm on Twitter, but yeah, sometimes Twitter gets mean. I kind of avoid Twitter most of the
Me
time
too.
now.
I have an account, but I
Yeah,
don't know what to do
it's not
there.
there so much.
It's not for me.
And then I've got a bunch of stuff coming up that's on my website. I have a newsletter, but the tour dates are on the website, and I'll be doing the book launch at Foxtail on April 12th. It's my daddy's birthday, so everybody come. And they are doing pre-orders at Foxtail with a big basket of goodies for somebody to win. So you might want to pre-order from there. I'll be in South Carolina at Litchfield in April, and then coming down into Charleston and Beaufort for the Pat Conroy Center, and ending up in Savannah at East Shaver, because how could I not? It's where the book is set. So I'm so excited about that. And then I'll be other places around Atlanta. I'll be at Eagle Eye. I don't remember where all. Mother's Day, I get to do a 2 p.m. event with mimosas for the ladies and their daughters at the Margaret Mitchell House.
Lovely.
So I'm excited for those plans. Yeah, it's going to be fun. I can't wait.
I'm so excited for you. I'm so happy. I still remember that day sitting outside on the bench outside of Foxtail.
We sat up there and cried because nobody cared about our story.
And talking. And so now she's here, and I'm so happy. And everybody go out, get the book, pre-order the book. If you're waiting on the book, like I said, you haven't read The River Witch, find you a copy of that too. And I will see you, if not before, I will see you on April 12th.
Thank you so much. I love this.
It was so much fun.
Very special.
All right. Good night, everybody. I'm going to go.
Yes. Tell everybody you named one of the characters.
Well, I want people to guess which character I named. We can make that a little fun game. But yes, I was very fortunate to get to name one of the characters. And once you read the book, you could probably guess who that character is.
It's beautiful. But, yes. It was perfect.
That was a lot of fun. We had fun with that. So.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all. I'm going to go watch my Kentucky Wildcats, and I will talk to you later, Kim. And just go to the Broadleaf page to see what all we have coming up next. We've always got a lot of stuff. Sign up for the retreat if you're a writer who needs to get away. Sign up for the conference. It's going to be wonderful, exciting. We have a bunch of fun stuff planned. So we hope to see you all soon, and everybody have a good night.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.